Hi, I'm Doug from the product team here at Sophos, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to get started with Endpoint and Intercept X protection inside Sophos Central. Now this assumes you have an active Sophos Central account and at least one licensed product already. You can click your product right here to get started, or exit out of this modal and select your product from the left-hand navigation bar. You can also check which products you have licensed by clicking on your name in the upper right corner here and choosing licensing from the drop-down. Now in this video we'll be focusing on Endpoint Protection and Intercept X, which are found in the Endpoint Protection section. But Sophos Central in and of itself is a cloud-based platform where you can manage our server, mobile, full disk encryption, wireless, email, and anti-phishing products. And whenever you like, you can visit the free trials link to learn more about each product and start a 30-day trial with a few clicks. So let's click into Endpoint Protection and run through a quick overview of policies by clicking the Policies link. Endpoint Protection starts with a base policy for each of the policies you see here. Now these base policies automatically apply to every user or computer until you create exemption policies that cater to particular users, machines, and groups. You have a few options for getting users into the system. You can add users manually or import them via CSV files by clicking the People link here. You can also sync with Active Directory by using our tool found in the Settings section here. And finally, when deploying the endpoint agent found in the Protect Devices section, more on that in a bit, it'll simply create users automatically each time it's installed on a machine. So let's visit each of these base policies, starting with Threat Protection. Let's click into this policy and head to the Settings tab. Now you'll notice the settings are grayed out and the Use Recommended Settings box is ticked. This is what we at Sophos believe to be the optimal best practice settings for just about any organization. We're also constantly adding new features to Sophos Central, and for many of them, we'll roll them out in phases. So from time to time, you'll notice that right now, for instance, at the time of this recording, we're rolling out our active adversary mitigations. At some point, this feature will be switched on automatically and added as a recommended setting. But for now, this account can turn one or more of these mitigations on manually by clicking the drop-down, choosing Custom, and ticking the various boxes here. So let's take a closer look at some of the settings in this policy by unchecking the Use Recommended Settings box temporarily. Let's first talk about our approach to file-based malware. You'll notice here that we have Sophos Deep Learning enabled. Now this is different from everyone else's machine learning in that the combination of deep learning with our tried and true endpoint protection means greater accuracy and far fewer false positives than competing products. And it's enabled by default, which is great. There's no training period for our deep learning system. It just works right out of the gate for your environment. We have a state-of-the-art labs team that constantly trains and tunes our deep learning engine, so you don't have to. So paired with this real-time scanning setting that leverages our 30+ years of industry experience, deep learning is made that much more powerful and accurate. We then get into our behavior-based detections, starting with real-time scanning features. This block access to malicious websites setting, for instance, checks against a database of known bad websites that grows by about 6 million URLs each week. This setting alone is responsible for stopping about 80% of attacks, and again, it's on by default. And then taking a look at our runtime protection section, this is really where the power of Intercept X begins to shine. Our exploit protection technology, for instance, is the most comprehensive and powerful exploit protection of any product on the market today. So it's great for dealing with fileless malware and other nasty advanced attacks. CryptoGuard is another one of our extremely popular features. This protects against ransomware that maliciously encrypts user files and demands payment to unlock them. So that's a quick look at the threat protection base policy. Let's head back up top and recheck the Use Recommended Settings box. Click Save, and we'll be on our way. Moving right along to Peripheral Control, we'll again click the Settings tab, and we'll see that this is disabled by default. Now, aside from disabling Peripheral Control, we've got two main modes. In Monitor mode, We'll allow all peripherals to be used, but we'll just audit them to get a good idea of what's going on in our environment. In control mode, we'll actually control whether peripherals can be allowed, read-only, or blocked. Wireless is a slightly different setting. We can allow block or block bridging, say to a nearby wireless coffee shop network or a cell phone hotspot while a machine is connected to the wired office network. We can also create exemptions here based on the history of logged devices. This is a new account, so we have nothing of note here yet, but if we check back in a week or so, this should be full of devices that we can exempt from the base peripheral control policy if we like. Next up is application control. Again, click the settings tab, and again, this is off by default. With app control, we're looking to blacklist apps we believe to be malicious or inappropriate. And as with peripheral control, we've got a sort of monitoring mode that we can use to either let controlled apps run in a detection-only mode or outright block them. We can also choose whether we want scheduled or full system scans to also detect controlled applications. So let's set that to yes and then get to work building our blacklist. Now blacklists can be cumbersome to manage, so we've got a few tricks up our sleeve here. Taking a look at document viewers, for example, we've got all these versions of Adobe Reader to worry about keeping updated. Well, Adobe is a big target for exploit-based attacks, so what we can do is just block all older versions of Reader to ensure that only the latest version is being used across the company. And then let's say we don't want people using any file sharing apps. They're just too risky. Well, obviously we'll just select all of them by using the master checkbox here, but we can also check this bottom box. By doing that, every time our labs team here at Sophos discovers new file sharing software, it'll get added to our blocked apps list automatically. Okay, let's move on now to data loss prevention, or DLP. This is actually a pretty advanced policy. What we're doing here is we're looking at the contents of files as they leave the endpoint. So let's enable these rules, and let's take a look at some of the controls that we have. Now for starters, we have some built-in region-based templates. So choosing the US region here, for example, this will let us get started quickly with general, healthcare, and finance rules. We can also create a custom policy on the right-hand side here. I like to first decide if I want to message my end users when a file that's being transferred needs to be confirmed or is blocked. We can then choose to add either an existing rule we've already created, a rule that controls content found inside files, or a rule that controls the transfer of specific file types or names. So let's choose new content rule to track specific content inside files. We'll call this financial data. And we can choose to create exclusions based on file type, but let's skip those. And then we need to decide what happens. Do we want to allow the content to transfer transparently without messaging the user? Do we want to gently nudge the user to think twice about the transfer? Or do we want to block it entirely? For now, let's choose to allow it. We'll simply create this as an auditing rule. Next, we'll choose the type of content. We can and will want to leverage our filters here. First to choose financial data, and then to choose the US region. And let's check these first two rules here. Now by default here, this rule will look for 10 routing numbers, for instance, before springing into action. We can change this to 1 to ensure we're logging as much as possible though. And finally, let's choose our destinations. We want this rule to apply to content detected in the following types of applications or media. We'll click Finish, and we've got our custom DLP rule all set up. Since this is in our base policy, this will start reporting on all connected Windows machines. Now on to web control. In this first section, additional security options, for instance, what we're doing is kind of extending the features found in our threat protection policy. We're blocking certain risky downloads by default. We're letting ads and uncategorized sites through, while blocking, allowing, or warning about various items based on how prevalent they are to attack. So to change settings here, we switch to let me specify whenever we want to override the default settings of a certain section. So we normally just warn people that Windows executables can be risky, but if we're looking for greater control, we can just block them entirely. So those are the security options, but we've also got other protections such as acceptable web usage. We've got some presets here, and again, we can override individual settings by choosing Let Me Specify. The Keep It Clean setting is on by default, which either warns or allows most categories with the exception of adult and potentially inappropriate content. And then we've got some data loss options when it comes to potential data sharing. We can allow, block, or warn our users when they visit web-based email sites and download sites. So that's web control. Let's head back out to the policies list and check out update management. Now with this, we can choose an update window for our machines. If we don't set this, our machines will check for product updates every hour. This option is good for highly controlled environments where we only want devices to perform updates during set hours. And last but not least, let's take a look at the Windows Firewall Management policy. What we're doing here is detecting and reporting the state of the Windows Firewall. Now by default, we'll monitor only, but let's go ahead and choose Monitor and Configure. Now from here, we can choose a connection type for each of the profiles seen here. So let's say we want to block public networks. We want to block private networks with exceptions. These are the exceptions set by Microsoft's Group Policy Orchestrator. And for domain networks, we'll leave those as allowed. So that's a quick run through of endpoint policies. Once we're happy with those, we can go ahead and grab our installers from the Protect Devices section here. We've got a few different options here for Windows and Mac. We can download the complete installer, which contains multiple products in a single agent, or we can select Choose Components to mix and match what we want to install. So that's a quick tour of endpoint protection in Sophos Central. You set your base policies, download your installers, and then you either add your users manually, use our AD Sync tool, or deploy the installer to automatically create them. If you get stuck, help is just a couple clicks away over here in the upper right corner.